They promised to meet if they were still single at 30. But when the day finally came, only one of them showed up. Who would it be? And what happened next will leave you breathless. A love lost for decades, a reunion that could heal or shatter everything. Stay tuned to witness a story of hope, resilience, and a love powerful enough to defy time. Before we dive into the incredible story, do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you never miss our powerful, life-changing content. Thank you for listening to this heartfelt story. If it moved you, share it, comments below, and let someone know you are never alone. I remember the cold bite of dawn brushing against my cheeks. The old oak tree stood at the edge of the field, its branches like twisted fingers, waiting. I had promised myself I would not hope. 30 years had etched lines across my face and soul. 30 years had taught me resilience. And yet, the heartbeat in my chest betrayed me. I reached the place. The sun caught the dew on the grass, turning it into scattered diamonds. No one. A hollow ache pressed against my ribs. I could smell the earth, damp and honest. The wind whispered through the fields, and I imagined it carried his laughter, like it always had in dreams. Closed my eyes. I remembered our youth, the letters we wrote and burned with longing, the promise we had whispered beneath the stars. If we are still single at 30, we will meet here. The hours passed slowly, stretched like taffy. I traced my fingers along the rough bark of the oak, feeling the grooves, the scars like my own. Then a figure appeared on the horizon. My heart jolted, caught between hope and dread. The dust from his steps rose in lazy spirals. I could see the light in his eyes, a fragile shimmer of recognition. And for a moment time stopped. But something in the set of his shoulders, the hesitation in his gait, told me a truth I was not ready to name. He was not the boy I remembered. He was more. And yet, he was less than the one I had dreamed of for decades. I swallowed the ache in my throat, the sudden rush of memories that clawed at my chest, and I waited for him to speak, to bridge the silence that felt like a canyon between us. The wind carried a scent of rain and hay, grounding me, reminding me that love could arrive with patience, with pain, and with hands ready to hold the weight of years. And I knew that whatever happened next, the promise of our hearts was alive, tangled in resilience, tenderness, and the immeasurable work of living fully. His eyes met mine, wide with something like recognition, but tempered with uncertainty. I wanted to step forward, to close the distance with a single heartbeat. But my legs felt rooted, heavy with years of longing and caution. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain-soaked soil and the faint smoke of distant chimneys. It reminded me of home, of simpler days when the world had seemed smaller and safer. He stopped a few paces away, hands shoved into the pockets of his worn coat. I noticed the tremor in his fingers, subtle, almost imperceptible. It mirrored the tremor in my chest, a fragile echo of fear and hope. "Is it really you?" His voice cracked like fragile glass. I nodded, though words failed me. I wanted to tell him everything, to spill the decades of dreams, disappointments, and quiet nights spent imagining this moment. But silence carried its own weight. The field stretched around us, golden stalks swaying like an audience of ghosts, witnesses to promises kept and broken. The oak tree loomed, a sentinel of memory and time. He shifted, and I smelled the faint trace of cedar and smoke, something familiar that made my chest tighten. The sun caught his hair, highlighting strands of silver, a stark reminder that youth had fled, but something deeper had remained. I waited, he said finally, and the words trembled between us. Bare, fragile, but loaded with everything left unsaid. I stepped closer, the ache in my chest easing just slightly. The grass pressed against my boots, wet and earthy, and the sky overhead, a canvas of pale gold and soft clouds, seemed to hold its breath. I could feel the pulse of his presence, a steady, imperfect rhythm that matched my own. And yet, a shiver of uncertainty crawled along my spine, a question unspoken, hovering in the space between longing and reality. I reached out, almost touching him, and the wind shifted again, stirring the oak leaves, as if the world itself was waiting for the next heartbeat, the next word, the next confession that could change everything. My hand hovered in the space between us, trembling. I wanted to bridge the years with a single touch, to feel the warmth I had dreamed of for decades. He took a hesitant step forward. The gravel under his boots crunched, sharp in the quiet morning. Each sound felt amplified, as if the world had narrowed to just the two of us. I inhaled the scent of wet earth, faint pine, and him. He had carried that scent in memory. But now it was real, grounding me, making my chest ache in ways words could not. I thought, his voice faltered, I thought you might not come. A laugh escaped me, bitter and tender all at once. I thought the same thing. We both froze, smiling through the tremors of old fear. The unspoken pain of years spent apart pressing against our ribs. The wind stirred again, brushing my hair across my face. And I noticed the small details, the crease of his brow, the way the sunlight caught the edge of his eyelashes. Details I had imagined countless times but never truly known. I wanted to be here, I said softly. And now that I do not know what to say. He stepped closer. His fingers brushed mine, tentative. And a spark, small but insistent, traveled up my arm, filling the hollow ache that had lingered for decades. The oak tree above us groaned as the wind caught its branches, leaves swirling like tiny dancers around our feet. I have carried this moment with me, he whispered, and I felt the weight of every missed birthday, every lonely winter, every quiet night when hope had seemed too fragile to survive. I could feel tears welling, hot and sudden, but also a strange serenity, a sense that the world had folded back on itself, and finally made room for something true. Our hands met fully this time, fingers entwined with a trembling certainty, and the field, the wind, the golden stalks around us, all seemed to hush, bearing witness to a love that had endured. Our fingers pressed together, warmth spreading slowly, a quiet promise in the simplest touch. I could feel the tremor in his hand, the echo of years spent alone, the invisible weight of all the words we had never said. I never forgot you, he murmured, and his voice was a fragile thread that threatened to unravel the walls around my heart. I swallowed hard, tasting the metallic tang of sudden tears. I never stopped hoping, I whispered back, and the words hung between us, fragile, yet filled with everything we had carried silently. The field seemed to breathe around us, the golden stalks swaying as though keeping time with our pulse. The sun had climbed higher now, casting long shadows that stretched toward the oak tree, as if trying to touch the ground where our hearts met. He tilted his head, eyes searching mine, looking for permission, for understanding, for the courage to step fully into the space we had left empty for so long. I wanted to fix the years, he said, and the honesty in his words cut sharper than any blade, yet somehow felt like balm. I wanted to tell him that life had already shaped me, had made me stronger, had given me resilience and tenderness I would never trade. And yet, the ache of missing him all those years surged, a hollow echo that reminded me love was never simple, never neat, never entirely safe. I took a breath, the scent of wet earth and grass filling my lungs, a reminder that life moves forward whether we are ready or not. I could feel his gaze burning into mine, and in it, the reflection of all our shared past, all our mistakes, all our longings, all our silent prayers. The wind shifted again, lifting stray hairs from my face, and I noticed the way his coat hung on his frame, the slight sag of shoulders heavy with unspoken truths, the faint tremor of hope mirrored in his eyes. I want to know you again, he said, and the words, simple and sincere, shook me to the core, for in them was the recognition that love, patient and enduring, can survive absence, suffering and time itself. I stepped closer, feeling the cool morning air brush my face. Every step seemed to echo in the empty field, each one pulling me deeper into the gravity of the moment. His eyes held a mix of fear and longing, and I recognized it instantly. It was the same ache that had lived inside me for years, the quiet desperation for connection, for recognition, for home. "I do not know where to begin," he said, voice trembling, fragile as glass. I reached up, letting my hand brush the side of his face. The warmth of his skin, roughened by time and toil, was enough to ignite a fire that had slept quietly inside me for decades. "I begin with here," I said softly. "With this moment. With us." A gust of wind swept across the field, carrying the faint smell of rain and the distant sound of a creek. It wrapped around us, pressing against our backs, as if the world itself was urging us to bridge the chasm of years. He exhaled sharply, the sound mingling with mine, and the tension between hope and fear pulled tight in the space between our bodies. "I never wanted to lose this," he whispered, and his hand closed over mine, holding it with the certainty of someone who had carried a lifetime of regret and longing. I felt tears sting my eyes, not just for the pain of years apart, but for the overwhelming relief that he was here, that we were finally confronting the past together. The oak tree loomed above us, ancient and silent, its shadow stretching over the golden field like a protective canopy. Leaves rustled softly, echoing the rhythm of our quickening hearts. I stepped even closer, our foreheads almost touching, feeling the pulse of life in him, the same pulse I had imagined so many nights alone. He began, faltering again, and I felt the weight of the unspoken, the vast expanse of years and choices, and the fragile possibility of forgiveness and love. The sky above deepened, clouds tinged with gold, and I realized that in this moment, time itself had bent toward us, offering a chance that had survived decades of absence, pain and unspoken longing. I felt the tremor of his breath against my forehead, a quiet rhythm that matched my own, and I realized how much I had imagined this moment, how much I had waited for it, how much I had feared it might never come. His eyes searched mine, full of questions, regrets, and hope all tangled together. "I thought I had missed you forever," he whispered, and the words cracked like fragile ice. But they were heavy with truth, with sincerity, with everything we had denied ourselves. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of his hand anchor me, letting the sun spill across the field, golden and forgiving. "Maybe we did," I admitted softly. "Maybe we lost years. But here we are, and that matters." The wind swirled around us, lifting stray strands of hair, carrying the scent of damp earth, wildflowers and cedar, mixing with the faint trace of him I had carried in memory, the one I had chased through dreams, through lonely nights, through the ache of decades. He shifted closer, and I could feel the slight roughness of his coat against my hands, the weight of his body, the warmth of him. The reality that he was here, not just in memory, not just in hope. I do not know how to be here after all this time," he said, voice low, sincere, trembling. "You do not have to know," I replied. "You only have to be here." A single leaf fell from the oak, spinning slowly to the ground, and I felt the fragility of the moment, the sharpness of hope and fear tangled together. I could see the faint glint of moisture at the corner of his eyes, and I realized we had both carried the same pain, the same longing, the same quiet prayers for a love that might still survive. I stepped fully into his space, our hands entwined, foreheads touching, feeling the pulse of decades in that single heartbeat, the ache of absence and the promise of presence merging into something fragile, yet unbreakable. And the field, golden and endless, held us in its quiet embrace, as if it had waited all these years for this union, for this reconciliation, for this fragile, trembling, undeniable spark of love. I could feel the weight of his gaze, heavy with unspoken truths, and I trembled at the thought of all the years we had wasted apart. "Do you remember the creek?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. He nodded. I could still hear the gentle rush of water over smooth stones, the sunlight dancing on ripples, the echo of laughter we had shared there as teenagers, before the world became complicated, before promises became fragile and easy to break. "I went back there once," he said, hoping to find a piece of us, something I could hold on to. The wind shifted, brushing my cheek with a whisper of rain to come, and the air smelled of wet grass and wildflowers, earthy and alive, grounding me in the present even as memories swirled. I felt the faint pressure of his hand tighten around mine, and it was a small anchor in a sea of emotion, reminding me that we were here, together, even if only for this fragile, trembling moment. "I have imagined this day," he said. "Every year, every birthday, every lonely night. I thought I might be too late." "You are not too late," I said, and the words felt heavier than any letter we had ever exchanged, full of the ache and tenderness of decades of hope. The oak tree creaked above us, its branches swaying in the wind like gentle applause, and I realized that the world had held its breath for us, that even time itself had paused, making space for this reunion, for this fragile truth of our hearts. He tilted his head, brushing a strand of hair from my face, and I caught a hint of cedar and rain in his scent, and I shivered not from cold, but from recognition, from the sudden, shocking clarity that our lives, apart and scarred, had led us here, to this field, to this moment, to each other. I do not know what comes next," he murmured, and I pressed my forehead to his, feeling the pulse of his life, the rhythm of hope, of regret, of longing, and I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. For the first time in decades, hearts unguarded, hands entwined, souls recognizing the impossible beauty of love endured. Our breaths mingled in the crisp morning air, and I felt the warmth of him, solid and real, pressing gently against the emptiness I had carried for so many years. "I never thought," he began, but stopped, as if the words might shatter the fragile moment between us. I shook my head softly, feeling the pulse of his hand through mine, a steady, imperfect rhythm that anchored me, that reminded me love could survive absence, despair, and time. The wind rustled the leaves above us, and I imagined that every whisper of the oak was a witness to decades of longing, of hope, of the aching pause between what was and what could be. "I wanted to tell you," he said, voice trembling low, laden with everything we had never said. But words always failed me, and now, standing here, I realize I have carried too much of the silence. I swallowed hard, feeling the ache in my throat, the sudden, sharp recognition of the emptiness years had carved into our hearts. "I know," I whispered. "I have felt it too, every day. And yet here we are." The sun broke through a veil of clouds, spilling light across the golden field, and I felt it warm my shoulders, illuminating the lines of his face, the gray streaks in his hair, the subtle tremor of hope reflected in his eyes. We stood there, silent but speaking volumes, hands entwined, foreheads touching, hearts beating with decades of memory, pain, and longing. "I do not know if we can ever go back," he said finally, voice barely audible over the gentle rustle of the wind. "You do not need to go back," I replied. "We can start here. We can let what is between us grow from this moment." The oak tree groaned above us, its branches swaying like an old, knowing guardian, and I realized that every step, every heartbreak, every lonely night had led us here, to this fragile, trembling truth, that love, patient and enduring, could survive everything, and somehow still bloom when the time was right. I felt the warmth of his hand tighten around mine, a quiet insistence, a tether to the years we had spent apart. "Every day," he whispered, "I imagined this moment. I wondered if I would recognize you, if you would even come." The field stretched around us, golden and endless, each blade of grass catching the sunlight, trembling like our hearts. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and cedar, and I felt it wrap around me, grounding me in the present, even as the past pressed heavily against my ribs. I thought maybe it was too late, he said, voice low, trembling. And yet here you are. I swallowed hard, tasting the metallic tang of tears, and I realized that hope had always lived quietly inside me, waiting for a moment like this to bloom fully, to prove that love could endure absence, pain, and longing. I stepped closer, feeling the roughness of his coat against my skin, the warmth of him pressing against my chest. Every heartbeat felt amplified, each one a fragile declaration of all we had survived. I do not know if I can explain the years, he said, voice faltering, eyes glistening with unshed tears. But I am here now, and that must mean something. I let out a shuddering breath, pressing my forehead to his, feeling the pulse of life, the rhythm of his heart, and I understood that what we had was larger than fear, larger than doubt, something enduring, fragile, and breathtaking all at once. The oak tree above us groaned in the wind, its branches swaying like silent witnesses, and I could feel the weight of every missed birthday, every lonely night, every aching silence, and the strange, soaring hope that we had finally arrived, at the place where all that waiting could transform into something real. He leaned into me slightly, breath warm against my lips, and I realized that the years apart had not dimmed the connection, had not stolen the tenderness, the longing, the possibility, that still pulsed between us, fragile and unstoppable at once. I closed my eyes, letting the moment stretch, letting the wind, the oak, the golden field, hold us in its quiet embrace. As I felt the undeniable truth settle deep in my chest, we had survived, we had waited, and now finally we could begin. We stood there, hands entwined, hearts finally in sync, and for the first time in decades, the ache of waiting softened into something tender. The wind whispered through the oak tree, and I realized that it had watched over us all these years, bearing witness to the promises we had made, and the silence we had survived. I cannot change the years we lost, he said softly, eyes tracing the lines on my face. But I can promise you this moment, and every moment after it, if you will let me. I smiled, letting the warmth of his hand seep into mine, feeling the steady pulse of hope that had been buried under fear and doubt. I will, I whispered, and I will carry forward everything we learned, about patience, about resilience, about the courage it takes to hold on to love even when it seems impossible. The field around us shimmered in the golden light, dew catching the sun like scattered diamonds. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the faint hum of birds, the whisper of the wind, felt like a gentle applause for what had endured. I pressed my forehead to his, and in that quiet, intimate moment, I understood the truth we had both carried silently. Life could be cruel, time could be long, and hearts could break. But love, patient and unwavering, would always find a way to bloom. You know, I said, voice trembling, I think the lesson is this, that even when hope seems fragile, even when the years seem lost, kindness, patience, and courage can guide us back to what truly matters. We do not find love because it is easy. We find it because we are brave enough to wait, to forgive ourselves and each other, and to show up even when we are uncertain. He kissed my hand, and I felt the weight of the years lift, replaced by something light, enduring and true. And as we walked together under the oak, the golden fields stretching endlessly before us, I knew that every heartbeat, every tear, every moment of patience had led us here, to a love that was more than a promise, more than a meeting at 30, more than the sum of our pasts. It was a testament to the human heart, that even through pain, through absence, through fear, grace, courage, and kindness could bring two souls home.